Have you ever noticed that the more you try to explain yourself, the more people twist your intentions? That standing up for truth, respect, or fairness can sometimes make you look like the one who's desperate, while the ones doing harm just keep walking free, untouched and unbothered? But what if the most powerful thing you could do isn't to react, but to retreat, to be silent, to allow the universe to work in your favor? Think of it like a snake caught in its own fury. The more it thrashes, the deeper it wounds itself. But when it stops resisting, nature steps in and healing begins. Or imagine an echo in a canyon. Whatever you send out eventually finds its way back. That's how karma works. The lies people tell, the damage they cause, the cruelty they spread, it always finds its way home. And in those moments when they expect you to fight, explain, or collapse under pressure, you have a choice. You can fall into the trap, or you can step back and let nature, time, and truth do what your words never could. And when you choose silence, when you rise above the noise, their own actions begin to haunt them. Their karma turns on them. So the real question is, when is the moment to stop reacting and start trusting the process? Stay with me, because the last truth I'll share will change the way you see everything. Let's begin. 1. When someone lies about you. Let's begin with one of the most painful situations in life. When someone spreads lies about you, it cuts deep, especially when the lies come from someone you trusted, or when the people around you start to believe what isn't true. Your instinct may scream to defend yourself, to clear your name, to make sure the truth is heard. But here's where Stoic wisdom asks you to pause. Because every time you react to a lie, every time you plead your case or chase the narrative, you hand the liar exactly what they want: your attention, your energy, your peace. And ironically, the more you try to defend the truth, the more people begin to question if you have something to hide. So why does it feel like reacting makes things worse? Because some people don't want truth. They want control. The person lying about you isn't searching for facts. They're searching for a reaction. They want you rattled. They want you emotional. They want you trapped in a storm where your every move becomes proof that their lie had weight. And when you fight back, you fall into their story. You become the character they created, not the one you truly are. This is why silence becomes your greatest strength. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple, clear, unshakable. It reminds us that our duty is not to correct every falsehood, but to remain aligned with what is just and real. When you know who you are, you don't need to shout it from the rooftops. Let karma take care of those who twist words and poison reputations, because karma always has a perfect memory. Let me tell you a story. There's a man I know. We'll call him James. He worked hard, showed up early, and treated people with kindness. But one day a jealous coworker accused him of something he never did. The rumor spread quickly. Whispers, side eyes. People pulled away. James had two choices: confront every person who heard the lie or let his actions speak louder. He chose silence. He didn't engage. He didn't go around begging for people to believe him. He stayed focused, remained respectful, and kept doing what he always had: good, honest work. And weeks later, the truth surfaced. The person who started the rumor was caught manipulating others in a similar way. Suddenly, the room that once whispered now respected his silence. James didn't just survive the lie, he rose above it. And in the end, karma handled what words never could. So how do you handle this when it happens to you? First, trust the long game. Lies may sprint, but truth always wins the marathon. It might not be instant. It might not even be public. But the truth doesn't need applause. It just needs time. Second, focus on your integrity. If your character is clean, if your heart is right, then the opinions of people who believe lies without asking for your side don't deserve your energy. And third, let karma do its work. The truth has a way of revealing itself through patterns. People who lie don't just lie once. Eventually, they expose themselves, not with your help, but with their own behavior. When the dust settles, you'll still be standing, calm, grounded, and respected, while their web of lies unravels around them. At the end of the day, your silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's a statement that says, "I will not stoop to your level. I know who I am, and I don't need your validation to prove it." When someone lies about you, don't lose your peace chasing their fiction. Stay still, stay grounded, let karma write the ending, and when the truth finally comes out, and it always does, you'll still have your dignity. 2. When someone betrays your trust. Few experiences leave a deeper scar than betrayal. Whether it's a close friend, a romantic partner, a colleague, or even a family member, the moment you realize that someone you trusted has turned against you, the pain is undeniable. It shakes you. It makes you question everything. Not just them, but yourself. How did I not see it? Why would they do this? Was it something I did? The instinct is to confront, to demand answers, to scream out for justice. You want to make them understand the damage they caused, to make them feel even a fraction of the pain they left behind. But here's the hard truth. People who betray you have already rewritten the story in their own minds, and no amount of talking will make them see it the way you do. That's why silence becomes your greatest weapon. Because when someone is capable of betrayal, they've already crossed a line you would never touch. They've justified it. They've explained it to themselves. They've painted themselves as the victim in a story they created. And if you try to reason with them, they'll twist your words. If you try to get an apology, they'll find a way to make you feel guilty. If you try to seek closure, they'll use your vulnerability as ammunition. So instead of getting caught in their chaos, you step back. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. This is where Stoic philosophy speaks loudest. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." And betrayal is one of those brutal trials. But here's what the Stoics knew. What hurts you can also teach you. Pain reveals truth. It burns away illusions. It shows you who really belongs in your life, and who was only there because of what they could take from you. Betrayal is not just loss. It's a filter. It removes what was fake and leaves you with what's real, including your own strength. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Sarah, had a best friend for over a decade. They had been through everything together. Heartbreaks, job losses, late-night breakdowns, and personal victories. This was someone Sarah believed would stand beside her for life. But one day she found out this friend had been gossiping behind her back, sharing personal secrets, and even sabotaging opportunities Sarah had worked hard for. It felt like a knife to the chest. Her first impulse? Confrontation. She wanted to shout. She wanted to make her see the damage. But then something in her paused. She remembered who she was, and who her friend had become. So instead of fighting back, Sarah chose silence. No warnings, no dramatic scenes, just a quiet exit. And here's what happened. The friend expected fireworks. She expected a screaming match. But what she got was nothing. And that silence was louder than any fight could have been, because it forced her to sit with her actions. No defense to twist, no argument to win, just herself and her choices. Over time, others began to see the patterns too. The same betrayal she dealt to Sarah, she eventually showed to others, and in the end, the silence that Sarah held on to protected her peace, her dignity, and her power. So how do you handle betrayal? First, accept the truth. Some people are not who they appeared to be. The pain doesn't come from what they did, it comes from who you thought they were. And once you face that, you stop hoping they'll be different. Second, don't waste your voice trying to make them see they're wrong. They already know. People who betray others don't do it by accident. They do it with intention. Trying to explain it to them won't heal you. It will only open the wound wider. Third, walk away with your head held high. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Your silence sends a message they'll never forget. I saw what you did, and I still choose peace over drama. And finally, let karma handle it. People who betray others don't suddenly stop. They repeat the same patterns. They leave a trail. And eventually karma catches up. The same way they hurt you, they'll hurt others. And when that day comes, your silence will echo louder than any revenge ever could. At the end of the day, your strength isn't in how loud you shout, it's in how calmly you walk away. Betrayal hurts. It shakes your soul. But it also sharpens your character. You learn what kind of love you deserve. You learn what loyalty really looks like. And you learn that walking away from someone who broke your trust isn't a loss. It's a lesson. One that will protect your heart for the rest of your life. So if someone betrays you, don't run after them. Don't give them another chance to lie, to manipulate, or to hurt you again. Let your silence be the closing chapter. Because people who throw away something real never truly win. They just delay the moment karma finally knocks on their door. 3. When someone insults you. We've all been there. Caught off guard by someone's sharp words, a sarcastic jab, a passive-aggressive remark, or a flat-out insult. It can come from anyone, a coworker, a stranger, a so-called friend, or even someone close to you. And your first instinct? To clap back, to defend yourself, to say something and anything that proves you won't be disrespected. But here's the truth the Stoics knew well. Reacting gives them power. And when you stay silent, that power returns to you. Insults are designed for one thing, to provoke. They're traps dressed as conversation. The moment you respond with anger, frustration, or even sarcasm, you've walked straight into the game they set for you. And the more emotional your reaction, the more satisfaction they get. Why? Because people who insult others aren't operating from a place of strength. They're projecting insecurity. And your reaction validates their need to feel superior, even for a moment. This is why silence is not just golden. It's bulletproof. When you remain calm, collected, and unbothered, you rob the insulter of what they crave most: attention. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Let that sink in. When someone insults you and you become bitter, loud, or aggressive in return, you're not protecting yourself. You're lowering yourself. You're giving them permission to control how you feel, how you think, and how you act. But when you choose silence, you choose freedom. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him David, had recently received a promotion at work. He had worked hard, kept his head down, and earned it. But during a company event, one of his colleagues, visibly jealous, muttered in front of the team, "Wow, I guess they're just giving out promotions to anyone these days." It was meant to humiliate him, to embarrass him in public. Everyone turned to see how David would respond. But he didn't take the bait. He looked the guy in the eye, smiled gently, and said nothing, not a single word. The silence was louder than any insult could ever be. And guess what happened? The colleague looked uncomfortable, even foolish. Without the reaction he hoped for, the moment fell flat. And David? He walked away with his dignity untouched. So how do you handle situations like this? First, remember that insults are never really about you. They reflect the insecurities of the person speaking them. People who feel good about themselves don't go around trying to tear others down. So when someone attacks you with words, it's not a reflection of your character. It's a mirror showing their own. Second, embrace your silence as strength. When you don't respond, you're not being passive. You're being powerful. You're refusing to let someone else dictate your emotional state. You're showing that their words carry no weight in your world. And third, always carry yourself with confidence. Insults only land when you doubt yourself. But when you know who you are, what you stand for, and the value you bring, no one's petty opinion can touch you. The person who walks away calmly, without reacting, is always the one in control. At the end of the day, you can't control what people say, but you can control what you respond to. And when you don't respond, when you walk away with grace and calmness, you send a message stronger than any comeback. You don't matter enough to shake me. This is the essence of Stoic power, not in force, but in restraint. Not in fighting noise with noise, but in standing still and letting karma handle the ones who throw stones. Because the people who insult others will one day face the same energy they put out. And when that happens, your silence will echo louder than their loudest words ever did. 4. When they play the victim. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating behaviors you'll ever deal with. When someone who hurt you suddenly flips the script and plays the victim. You know the type. They twist the facts, leave out key details, and make it seem like they were the ones wronged. Suddenly, you're not just dealing with a liar. You're dealing with someone who wants sympathy, attention, and control, all while painting you as the villain. And your natural reaction might be to fight back, to defend yourself, to show people the truth. But here's the harsh reality. The more you try to explain yourself to someone who's committed to misunderstanding you, the more you feed their narrative. People who play the victim aren't interested in fairness. They're not trying to resolve the situation or take accountability. They want power through pity. And they'll manipulate emotions, distort timelines, and even cry on cue. Not because they're hurt, but because it keeps the spotlight on them. The more you react, the more proof they gather to convince others that you're the aggressor. And that's why your silence, your refusal to engage in their performance, becomes your greatest advantage. This is where Stoic wisdom offers a higher path. Epictetus once said, To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate. This applies not just to you, but also to the people who constantly play the victim. They're whining, they're blame-shifting, they're theatrics. They're not looking for truth, they're looking for applause. But here's the thing. Every act has a time limit. Eventually, the mask slips, and karma always arrives. Only not in the moment, but in due time when their own pattern of manipulation starts to expose them for who they really are. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Rachel, had a coworker who constantly created drama. Every time she was held accountable for something she'd done wrong, she'd cry. She'd shift the blame. She'd say things like, "I can't believe you'd think that of me," or "I would never hurt anyone." She'd cry in front of the boss, spin the situation, and suddenly Rachel was painted as cold, aggressive, and unfair. At first, Rachel tried to defend herself. She explained the truth. She even brought evidence. But the more she spoke, the more it looked like she was attacking a helpless victim. So one day, Rachel made a different choice. She went silent. No more arguments. No more justifications. She let the manipulator perform alone. And here's what happened. Over time, others started to notice the pattern. They saw how this coworker was always the victim, in every situation with every person. Eventually, the act wore thin. People stopped believing her. The same trick she used against Rachel backfired on her, and all Rachel had to do was wait in silence. Karma had perfect timing. So how do you deal with people who play the victim? First, don't argue. Don't get sucked into a fight where the rules keep changing. These people are not seeking resolution, they're staging a show. And when you try to correct the record, you become a character in their performance. Second, remain calm and detached. You don't need to prove anything to people who already chose to believe a lie. Truth doesn't need your defense. It just needs patience. And finally, trust karma. People who manipulate and deceive others eventually expose themselves. You don't have to unmask them. Their own actions will do that over time, especially when their performance no longer earns them applause. At the end of the day, silence is not surrender. It's a strategic decision. It says, I refuse to entertain lies. I refuse to let someone else write my story. And when you walk away from the drama, you give karma all the space it needs to do what your words never could. The people who play the victim may win in the short term. They may convince a few people, gain some sympathy, and manipulate their way out of a situation. But they always lose in the long term. Why? Because the truth leaves a trail. And eventually everyone sees it, so when you encounter someone like this, remember, you don't need to raise your voice. You just need to raise your standards and stay silent. 5. When they ignore your worth. One of the most painful realizations in life is coming to terms with being undervalued. Whether it's in a relationship, a friendship, or even at work, there will come a moment when you realize you've been giving your time, your energy, your loyalty, and in return receiving silence, indifference, or even disrespect. You've been consistent, supportive, and present, but somehow it's never enough. You show up for others, and yet they treat your presence as if it's guaranteed. That's when it hits you. They don't truly see your worth. And the instinct to prove yourself starts rising, to show them what they're taking for granted, to demand recognition. But the truth is, the more you fight to be seen, the more invisible you become. This is the paradox. When you beg to be valued, you devalue yourself. The more you try to convince someone to appreciate you, the more they believe you're easily replaceable. Why? Because people don't cherish what's always chasing them. They don't respect what's constantly available. But the moment you step back, the moment your presence becomes absence, that's when they finally feel what they've lost. That's the power of silence. That's when karma quietly walks into the room and takes your place. Stoic wisdom reminds us to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." And when it comes to your worth, nothing reveals the truth faster than your absence. You don't need to argue. You don't need to plead. You don't need to remind anyone of who you are. Let time speak. Let silence do the heavy lifting, because those who truly valued you will notice your absence, and those who didn't, they were never meant to stay in your life anyway. Let me share a story. A man I know, we'll call him Jake, was always the one putting in effort. In his friendships, in his workplace, in his family. He was the one reaching out, organizing things, checking in, showing up, making sure others felt supported. But over time, he began to see a pattern. If he didn't call, no one did. If he didn't make plans, weeks would pass in silence. If he didn't go out of his way, he'd be forgotten. He was giving 100 to people who were giving 10. And it finally clicked. He wasn't being appreciated. He was being used for his consistency. So Jake made a powerful choice. He didn't explode. He didn't send angry texts. He didn't post cryptic messages online. He simply stopped chasing. No dramatic exit, no guilt trip, just silence. And you know what happened? The people who truly valued him, they noticed. They reached out. They made the effort. But the ones who only kept him around out of convenience, they disappeared. And that disappearance wasn't a loss. It was a blessing. Because silence doesn't just show you who you are to others. It shows you who they are to you. So how do you handle being ignored or undervalued? First, stop explaining your worth. Your value is not a pitch to be sold. It's a truth to be recognized. If someone can't see it while you're there, it's not your job to convince them. Second, pull back your energy and observe. The right people won't need reminders to appreciate you. They'll show up on their own. And the wrong ones, they'll fade away. Not because you pushed them, but because they were never truly connected to begin with. And third, let karma do what it always does. When you remove yourself from a space where you're not appreciated, you create space for realization to hit. People don't notice presence. They notice absence. And when the silence settles in, those who took you for granted are left to sit with the echoes of everything you once gave so freely. At the end of the day, your silence is not punishment. It's clarity. It's the calm way of saying, I gave you the opportunity to value me. You chose not to. Now I choose me. And in that space, karma begins to unfold, not through revenge, but through awareness. Awareness of what they lost. Awareness of who they ignored. And awareness that your worth never diminished. It was just never seen by the wrong people. So when someone ignores your worth, don't chase them. Don't try to convince them. Let silence speak. Let karma echo. And let your absence become the reminder they never expected. The one they can't forget. 6. When they try to provoke you. Let's talk about one of the most important skills you can master in life. Not reacting when someone is trying to provoke you. Because there will always be people who thrive on conflict. They poke, they prod, they say things that cut deep, not because they're hurt, but because they want to see if they can control your emotions. Their goal isn't truth, it's chaos. And the moment you react, with anger, with frustration, with defense, you've handed them the very power they were looking for. It starts small, a sarcastic comment here, a passive-aggressive jab there, and if you bite, they escalate. Why? Because your reaction becomes their fuel. Your emotional shift becomes their victory. And that's why silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's self-mastery. Because people can only control you if you give them access to your emotions. And when you stay calm, unshaken, and silent, you remove the very thing they were hoping to feed off. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This is the core of Stoic resilience. You can't control how others behave. You can't stop people from being petty, rude, or cruel, but you can choose whether their behavior disturbs your inner peace. You can choose silence, you can choose detachment, and in that moment, you become truly untouchable. Let me tell you a story. There's a man I know. We'll call him Adam. He worked in a high-pressure office with a colleague who always stirred the pot. Every meeting, every group project, this colleague would throw little comments at Adam, subtly undermining him in front of others. At first, Adam felt the need to defend himself, to push back, to correct the record, and every time he did, the drama only intensified. Arguments, office tension, sleepless nights, until one day Adam decided to stop giving that person access to his peace. The next time the colleague tried to provoke him in a meeting, Adam didn't say a word. He didn't defend. He didn't flinch. He simply smiled, gave a calm nod, and kept moving. No energy wasted, no tension fed. And do you know what happened? The provocateur got frustrated. He tried again and again, but without a reaction, his efforts collapsed. Eventually, he gave up. because the power he once held evaporated in Adam's silence. So how do you deal with someone who constantly tries to provoke you? First, recognize the game. If someone keeps trying to push your buttons, it's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. They're looking for a rise. And the moment you see that, you take back control. Because once you understand their motive, you no longer fall for the trap. Second, choose stillness over chaos. Your calmness is the loudest statement you'll ever make. People expect anger. They expect defensiveness. But silence, that confuses them. That shakes them. Because they can't win a game you're no longer playing. Third, stay anchored in your truth. Just because someone throws shade doesn't mean it touches you. Just because they try to pull you into a conflict doesn't mean you have to attend the war. Your silence doesn't mean you're ignoring injustice. It means you refuse to waste energy on battles that lead nowhere. And that's not avoidance. That's wisdom. And finally, let karma do the rest. The same people who go around provoking others eventually meet someone who gives them a taste of their own tactics. And when that day comes, your hands will be clean. You won't need to say, "I told you so." You'll already have your peace, you'll already have your power, and you'll already be miles ahead of the chaos they tried to drag you into. At the end of the day, your power doesn't come from how loud you shout. It comes from how well you can remain silent when provoked. That's real strength. That's real discipline. The one who reacts is controlled, but the one who observes, who stays quiet, measured, and focused, is in command of everything. So when someone tries to provoke you, don't give them what they want. Don't let their bitterness become your burden. Let them speak. Let them project. Let them exhaust themselves trying to get a rise out of you. Because when they realize they can't, when they finally see that you are grounded in stillness, they lose. And not just in that moment, but in the long run. Because karma doesn't need noise. It just needs space. And your silence is the invitation. 7. When they regret losing you. There's a moment that comes after silence when the person who hurt you, disrespected you, or took you for granted suddenly realizes what they've lost. It usually doesn't happen right away. At first they think you'll come back. They assume you're just upset, that you'll reach out, that you'll eventually fold. But then, weeks pass. Silence lingers, and reality sets in. That's when the regret begins to creep in. That's when they start to replay every moment they dismissed, every kindness they ignored, every warning they brushed aside. And suddenly your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. But here's the thing. By the time they regret it, it's already too late. When someone regrets losing you, your first instinct might be to feel conflicted. Maybe you want to give them a second chance. Maybe you want them to finally understand the pain they caused. Maybe, just maybe, you want closure. But ask yourself, if they only realized your value after you left, did they ever truly value you to begin with? Or did they only see your worth when it was no longer available? Stoic philosophy teaches us something powerful here. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And being the master of yourself means having the strength to walk away and stay away, even when someone finally wakes up to what they've lost. It means honoring your dignity more than your desire to be wanted. Because real self-respect isn't about revenge or proving a point. It's about never again settling for someone who had to lose you to learn your value. Let me share a story. A woman I know, we'll call her Olivia, was in a long-term relationship where she gave everything. Her love, her time, her support, her patience. She was always there. And her partner? He took her for granted. He assumed she'd always be there, no matter how little he gave in return. She stayed longer than she should have, hoping things would change. But eventually, she reached her limit. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She just left. Quietly. Completely. And with a calmness that shocked him. At first he thought she'd come back. He waited. He sent a few messages, but her silence remained. And that silence became a mirror. One that showed him exactly who he had been and what he had lost. Weeks turned into months. And when he finally came back, full of apologies, full of promises, Olivia had already healed. She had moved on. She had found peace in her silence, and she wasn't willing to give that up for someone who had to lose her to understand her worth. So how do you handle someone who regrets losing you? First, don't make it easy for them. If someone only values you after your absence, that's not love. That's realization. and realization is not enough to earn your presence again. Second, resist the urge to explain. You don't need to justify your silence. You don't need to walk them through the pain they caused. Let them sit with their own karma. Let them figure out on their own why you're no longer there. And third, honor your growth. You didn't go silent to punish them. You went silent to protect your peace. And if that silence led you to healing, to strength, to clarity, don't throw that away just because someone finally opened their eyes. At the end of the day, silence after mistreatment isn't coldness. It's closure. It's the act of choosing yourself. And when someone regrets losing you, the most powerful thing you can do is not return. Not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you're finally done hurting yourself. Let karma handle what needs to be handled. Let your silence echo where words failed. And most of all, let your absence remind them of the version of you they'll never get back. Not because you changed out of pain, but because you grew out of wisdom. 8. When your growth intimidates them. There's a silent moment in your journey when you start to change. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. You begin setting boundaries. You stop seeking approval. You become more mindful of your time, your peace, your purpose. And that's when something strange happens. People around you start pulling away. Not because you've hurt them, not because you've wronged them, but because your growth threatens their comfort. And instead of supporting you, they become cold, dismissive, or passive-aggressive. They may not say it outright, but you feel it. The compliments fade, the conversations shift, the support disappears, and the instinct to ask why kicks in. You may want to confront them, explain your intentions, or even tone yourself down just to keep the peace. But here's where Stoic wisdom gives you clarity. When your evolution makes others uncomfortable, it says more about their limitations than your path. Not everyone will celebrate your progress, especially if your growth highlights their stagnation. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That's the Stoic path. You don't shrink yourself to fit their expectations. You don't beg them to understand the version of you that no longer apologizes for healing, improving, and evolving. You stay silent, and you keep rising. Because your silence in this moment isn't weakness, it's focus, it's discipline, and most importantly, it's respect, not just for others, but for yourself. Let me share a story. There's a man I know. We'll call him Leo. A few years ago, Leo made a decision to completely shift his life. He started waking up earlier, reading philosophy, going to the gym, cutting back on mindless distractions. He stopped partying. He stopped complaining. He stopped saying yes to people who only drained him. And at first, his friends laughed. They mocked the changes. They called him too serious, too intense, even boring. One friend even told him, "You're not the same anymore." And that was the moment Leo realized they were right. He wasn't the same, and he wasn't supposed to be. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just kept going, quietly, consistently. And over time, those same friends who once doubted him started struggling with the same problems he had overcome. And while he had outgrown those cycles, they were stuck in them. That's when karma stepped in, not as punishment, but as perspective. And Leo? He had already outgrown the need to be understood by people committed to staying the same. So how do you deal with people who feel threatened by your growth? First, don't slow down for anyone. Your path is yours for a reason. The people meant to walk beside you will keep up. The rest will fall behind, not because you pushed them, but because they chose not to grow. Second, avoid defending your evolution. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you're choosing peace, discipline, or purpose. If they were truly for you, they'd be proud, not petty. Third, protect your energy by staying silent when necessary. Not everyone is ready to hear about your growth. Some are too busy resenting their own lack of progress. So let your actions speak. Let your peace be your response. And let karma handle the rest. At the end of the day, growth will always separate you from people who prefer comfort over change. Your silence in those moments isn't rejection, it's redirection. You're not leaving them behind out of pride. You're simply choosing a life that's aligned, and that's something they have to come to terms with on their own. When you grow, you force others to look in the mirror. Some will be inspired, others will be intimidated. That's not your burden to carry. Your job is not to make everyone comfortable. Your job is to become the most authentic, powerful, and peaceful version of yourself. So when your growth starts making people uncomfortable, stay silent, stay focused, and let karma handle what your words never could. If you've stayed with me this far, know this. Silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's strength. And in a world full of noise, manipulation, and emotional chaos, choosing not to react is one of the most powerful things you can do. Each of these 8 moments isn't just about letting karma do the work. It's about reclaiming your peace, protecting your dignity, and living in alignment with your highest self. Because the truth is, you don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't have to chase justice with words when karma is already working behind the scenes. Sometimes the greatest response is no response. Not because you don't care, but because you've evolved past the need to prove anything. You know who you are. You know what you deserve. And you trust that what's meant for you won't need to be forced, defended, or begged for. So the next time you're tempted to react, to explain, or to break your silence just to feel heard, remember this video. Hold the line, let karma handle what your voice no longer needs to, and walk away with your head held high, knowing that your peace speaks louder than any argument ever will. If you found value in today's message, give this video a like to help it reach more people who need it. And if you're walking your own journey of stoic strength and self-mastery, subscribe for more insights every week. Leave a comment below and let me know. Which one of these 8 moments hit home for you? Until next time, stay calm, stay grounded, and let karma do the talking.